Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is on, as the Book of Mormon musical expresses it, I believe that ancient Jews built boats and sailed to America. Coming up. So this is my first video on Mormonism, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as they often prefer to be called. And possibly the beginning of a new series of videos, if this one finds an audience and gets some traction. So in that spirit, if you're interested, then please do like and subscribe and share this video. So though this is the first time I've talked about Mormonism here, it's certainly not the first time I've thought about Mormonism. In fact, my Mormon scriptures are pretty well thumbed, as you can see. Various notes here in the beginning, and my Doctrine and Covenants is basically falling apart. So it's a subject area that I guess you could say I've been inexplicably drawn back to time and time again. I've routinely found myself over the years returning to consider the claims of the Mormon religion. And I suppose that's because I've found those claims to be in equal part compelling and, let's be honest, strange. So the only difference this time is I thought I would share some of my thinking with you all. So to be clear, this is in no way meant as a Mormon bashing exercise. I'd find that pretty tiresome. And as I approach these questions, I do so generously. I prefer often to give the benefit of the doubt and explore these claims in the spirit that Mormons themselves might consider them and think about them. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I'll begin with a tiny bit of background. The Jews in America claim finds expression in the Book of Mormon, which is the discovered and translated book by the religion's 19th century founder, Joseph Smith. So I'll quote the text directly to get us started here. So this is the first book in the Book of Mormon, the first book of Nephi, chapter 18, verse 8. And it came to pass, after we had all gone down into the ship, and had taken with us our provisions and things which had been commanded us, we did put forth into the sea, and were driven forth before the wind towards the promised land. So in the Book of Mormon, this is not in fact a one-off event. It happens 3 times. There are 3 groups of people, all from the ancient Near East, who purportedly make the voyage across the ocean, namely the Jaredites, the Lehites, and the Melachites. So part of the difficulty with this claim is there is simply a complete lack of any concrete historical or archaeological evidence. There have been various scholars who have argued that there were people to arrive in the Americas prior to Christopher Columbus, to discover America, that is. The Vikings, the Chinese, and the Polynesians all being contenders. And of course, such claims appeal to Mormons because that increases the possibility or the probability of people's having been able to make the voyage from the Near East to America. But again, there's simply no evidence to back up this either. So you're left, I suppose, having to grant that although there is no evidence for such a voyage, the voyage is nonetheless possible, in the sense that if you get on a wooden craft, it is possible that it's blown across the entirety of the Atlantic Ocean safely. It's just exceedingly unlikely. But of course, the claim of the Book of Mormon goes much further than this. These groups of people having reached the American continent, grew into various civilizations, most importantly the Nephites and the Lamanites. And the Book of Mormon claims to be a record of these civilizations, recounting key events and their unfolding histories, wars, famines, and the like. Ultimately, even the visitation of Jesus himself when he appears on the American continent and spreads the gospel amongst the peoples there. Again, you would expect some kind of archaeological evidence, perhaps some city ruins or evidence of large-scale warfare, but again, there's none to speak of. These civilizations eventually basically just self-implode, and many years later, what's left is the Native American peoples. Oh, and the Book of Mormon itself, which was transcribed onto golden plates and buried in a hole near where Joseph Smith lived, and then, as it said, purportedly discovered by him and translated by him. So, on the face of it, these are extremely far-fetched claims. And this is where Mormons need to play the faith card. The faith card in Mormonism has to do a lot of heavy lifting. So, for example, if I was to say to you, I believe that Jesus died and that 3 days later he was resurrected. This is, of course, a faith claim. But there's a lot of pieces surrounding that faith claim that are historically verifiable. Was Jesus a real dude? Yeah, almost certainly he was. Was there a Roman Empire that occupied a city called Jerusalem? Yeah. Did they routinely crucify troublemakers? Yeah. Can we trace the historical development of the Jesus movement that came about after his death? Yep, we can do that as well. Do people miraculously come back to life after being dead for 3 days? So that's where faith has to come in. But it's not even that straightforward, because what does resurrection mean? Of course, for more conservative Christians, they do think about it, resurrection that is, in these more binary terms. He either did come back to life, physically, bodily, or he didn't. But within Christianity at large, including more liberal Christians, there is of course a spectrum of beliefs and understandings concerning the resurrection. A comparable claim, on the other hand, within the Book of Mormon, needs to be taken 100% on faith. There is no verifiable peripheral components to draw upon. And we don't have records of these civilizations. We can't walk around the ruins of some of the cities that are mentioned and so forth. And when you end up with this kind of situation, it creates an interesting psychological context for a religion. It demands of its adherents a lot of cognitive dissonance. The phenomena which arises when one is required to hold at the same time contradictory beliefs. An uncomfortable position to be in. And when one finds themselves in that situation, they naturally try to resolve the conflict by accumulating evidence, which is not really evidence, just pieces of information which people hold in their heads to diminish the strength of the opposing side, whatever they perceive the opposing side to be. And this happens in religion generally a lot. If someone wants to believe, but they come across a conflict which unsettles their belief, they seek out a piece of information that can resolve that conflict. All the better when that resolving piece of information can come from an individual that they perceive to be an authority. And this has an effect of basically putting that conflict to bed. And of course, it's not just the case in religion that this happens. We play these kind of psychological games with ourselves whenever we're trying to convince ourselves that we believe or belong to a particular ideological group, because, oh, how much we want to believe in something. If one is a thoughtful, conscientious person then, for them to either remain in or join Mormonism, the Latter-day Saints, they would need to do this kind of cognitive dissonance a lot. In other words, the buy-in for the Latter-day faith is very high, which makes it all-consuming in someone's life, in a way that many other Christian denominations are not. And I think this explains why Mormonism has been so successful in recent decades, being one of America's fastest growing religions, as it's very difficult to be a lukewarm Mormon. You either believe it or you don't. So, ancient Jews in America, I'll leave you to decide. Thanks for watching.